This is Coda Radio, episode 125 for October 27th, 2014. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our excellent host, established on the East Coast, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Hello, Mr. Fisher.
Hello, Mr. Dominic. All right, what's the story? What happened to your regular microphone this week?
Yeah, I just can't get it hooked up. So I'm down to, me and my wife are down to one car, and I don't have the ability to go back and get it, so.
Well, interestingly enough, this is going to be a rather meta episode of the show today, so it's kind of appropriate we start with a weird technical behind-the-scenes question right at the beginning. So 125, right. We do hope to get to some emails today. We're not going to start with the emails this week, and I don't know if we're going to get to them because I've got to do the Linux Action Show in about an hour, so we'll see how far we get. But Mike and I got into a pretty good pre-show conversation, which, because I'm a dummy, I did not record any of. I don't normally, I figure that's like our off-air, well, we're on air, but it's off-record, right? So that's like our real talk time.
Right.
Where we get on the show, we don't say things we really think. It's all an act, right? I don't know why I don't record the whole damn thing. Anyways, we decided to kind of talk about the format of the show. It actually initially kind of started with talking about the schedule, because both Mike and I feel like Monday isn't working, but we don't, we're busy guys. We don't really have another time to do it.
Yeah, it feels like Monday, particularly, I think it's, well, I didn't know last was recorded on Mondays too. I thought it was Tuesday.
No, it's not. It's Sundays.
Okay.
But
Sundays.
I was in the air on Sunday.
Yeah. I mean, on my end, Monday forces a very compressed show. Just because of the way it goes, right?
Well, it's the middle
on the
of
East Coast.
It's the middle of the, or it's towards the end of the first day of the week.
Right, and Mondays, and it's 3 o'clock on the East Coast, so it's kind of like, there's always Mondays. Really, Monday's the worst day of my week in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
because
and what's funny is the rest of the business world starts on Monday, and they expect the rest of the business world to start their day on Monday. However, I generally don't even open up my inbox until Monday evening at the best, because I have Tech Talk in the morning and then Coda Radio in the afternoon. Well, and so I don't get any of my business stuff done. And then so I have to sneak it all in there in between shows and stuff. It's really a mess. So I totally feel you on that. So
just in terms of scheduling, what seems to be happening is like a lot of customers don't like to email or call you on Friday. So they wait till first thing Monday.
Right.
And yeah, it's just a rough day. But let's.
Or emails that came in over the weekend that expected a weekend reply, but I have a new policy of not generally responding over the weekend, so I got to get to them on Monday. But then I don't even get to them until Monday evening. Anyway, so that's where the conversation started. Well, what could we do to kind of give ourselves a little more breathing room so that way we can put some more into the show? And as we started going on, we started kind of asking ourselves, well, is it maybe more appropriate to do a format change of the show? But what would that look like? And what would be ideal? And the topic of maybe more interviews on the show is something we tossed around, or different content could be covered. So where do you want to start in sort of?
Well, so I feel like we should just go through the same, because we never really resolved the line of reasoning. We just went halfway through it, and then you were like, oh, I forgot to hit record.
So, do you want to start? Well, which direction do you want to take the format conversation?
Let me state what I see as the problem.
Okay.
Right. So, Coda Radio, when it started, didn't really have. There were no other. I mean, podcast is not really competition, right? Because if you're like me, you listen to them all anyway, so it doesn't make a difference. But there weren't many other dev podcasts.
No, in fact, one of the reasons we started is because one of the more popular ones kind of shut down, and we were like,
shut down.
Right, and we're like, well, now what are we going to do? So we're like, well, we should make a show.
And I think what happened is initially it started with a very naive, very ambitious kind of format, right? We will be a dev show, period. Which sounds like an obvious idea, like Linux Action Show is a Linux show, period, right? But dev and I guess it extends to Linux too. It's too big, and I listen to a lot of other dev shows, and in a way, I feel like I won't say better, but certainly I could see how they might have an easier time setting things up than we do, and therefore feel more
Right.
put together.
Let me. I'll jump in
Go
here. So
ahead.
it's something interesting. One of the things I learned doing Linux Action Show versus Stoked, the Star Trek online podcast, is you would think on the surface there would be infinite things to cover in the Linux Action Show, and Stoked would be very limited. But it turns out establishing the boundaries of what the content is and what this show, establishing those boundaries more tightly, what it covers, allows you to sort of hyper-focus in on that area and find all of the really interesting and fascinating nuance where there's a lot of opportunity for dialogue. Because in that nuance, there's difference of opinion. Where when you go very, very, very broad, it becomes more about the broader technologies like Java as a whole or Objective-C as a thing as a whole, right? And it's much more abstract.
And I think too, at least for me, sometimes it forces me into these positions of having to, in 45 minutes, talk about something on such a trivial surface level. Like, for instance, I bitched out about Xamarin a few weeks ago, right? I gave them a terrible time. And I gave them that time on the phone, too, by the way. Well, there's a little more nuance to that. Yes, they screwed up. Yes, it's their fault. Yes, they probably should have given me my money back, right? But it would have been great to be able to, one, explain the issue more deeply, but also, to be fair, talk about things they have in the past done correctly. And I guess it just feels like because of the wide breadth, the wide purview, we're forced to take the most superficial look at everything. Like one example I was talking about on the pre-show with Chris was, we had all these interviews. I was looking at more of an interview format maybe. And I'm just going through some of the ones that were really memorable to me where, we had Ben Morse on. Well, that was probably entertaining for me because he's another mobile startup guy, but a lot of people didn't like it because it's too, even though he claims not to be an iPhone guy, he was effectively pushing and developing iOS software.
Well, and people really hated it back then when we talked about mobile.
Right.
That was people don't really seem to yell at us as much about that anymore.
Well, I think those people have stopped listening.
Maybe.
Then we had, which I thought was a really good one, Mark Heckler from Oracle, which was fantastic. But again, it was all about Java, right? And then we had, and I'm not saying that I mind the hate mail. I'm just saying Java itself. Java, what is it? Java Posse has been around for about 5 years. Like, just Java is a huge topic. Then we had, let's see, Oranani or Yande Rahim, goes by both names, of .NET, of RavenDB fame. Well, that one I felt, though really interesting guest, great guy, great developer, there's not a whole lot of middle ground of understanding, at least for me to him. Maybe he gets me totally and he gets iOS and he just might be that much smarter than me. And I felt like that interview in particular, as I listened back to it, was very mismatched.
Like we were talking past each other.
We were talking past each other. He's talking about deep server optimizations on the database side, and I'm saying, well, how will this make developing an iOS app easier? Which really aren't the same conversation. Though certainly if you're in the .NET space and you are looking for that kind of database, RavenDB is actually pretty cool. There's nothing wrong with it. He's a good presenter. It just felt too far out of what, at least me personally, normally does in a day. So it got me to thinking, well, I'm looking at all these other shows. Recently mobile development, particularly iOS development shows, are a dime a dozen, right? So I'm not sure.
It's like it's the biggest category, really, I think, in podcasting. I think maybe, I don't know about just dev iOS, but like that general area about Apple and Macs, it seems to be the largest category in the tech podcasting area.
Yeah, I don't know why. I
think it's pretty easy. I think it's because podcasting is very popular among iPhone owners, and it's huge in iTunes. So if you're an iTunes user and an iPhone user, you're likely interested in Mac and iOS development, and because they sell so many millions of those devices, it's actually a big enough market just to serve to them.
Yeah, and actually, I guess I do know why, right? Because if you're an iOS or Mac person, you care a lot about design, and you can talk about design forever.
Right. And again, there's a lot of little nuance in a lot of that stuff from
Right.
the conversation.
And there's a lot of disagreement, and it's one of those things where, again, getting back to like the RavenDB thing, if you put me against Oren and we want to talk about database optimizations, well, he's right and I'm wrong no matter what, right? Because I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not the guy who wrote the database. I'm the guy who uses I'm his customer, not his, not the DBA guy. What does that mean in terms of, I guess we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? So I started looking at other podcasts. So one thing is the .NET podcast space has died. Like there's nothing. I mean, there's a couple of the older ones that are still hanging around, but I mean, Chris, are you feeling this as well? That just in terms of like in particular non-Apple development shows are just kind of gone.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a few Ruby on Rails shows. I think there's a Python show.
They feel. I listened to a few of the Rails ones. They feel very much like the Cocoa shows. And I guess there's a lot of cross-section, same types of people.
I would say, though, the other podcast areas, they're all dwarfed in comparison to the iOS stuff or anything Apple, really. I'd say it's all dwarfed. I think there's a huge, there's just a huge home turf advantage to those podcasts. So I think in terms of like, I would say it's almost a 1-to-6 ratio. I don't know, something pretty nuts.
Yeah. So I wonder what your thoughts are, Chris, in chat room. If you
well, so the first thing that came to my mind is there's two ways I could see. There's two paths I see going. Oh, actually three. So one would be just to sort of immediately follow yours. Would be to hyper focus in a more specific niche category. The problem would be is the categories that are large enough to still sort of maintain the same download numbers would probably be pretty well served already. Now the second, but we'll put that aside. The second path I see would be like, you could do something like where there's another host that has like opposing views, another. So for one example, I guess probably not your favorite, but probably another niche we could double down on would be the home turf advantage to Jupiter Broadcasting, which is the open source crowd. We have a lot of.
So you can Hannity and Combs it, right?
Yes.
You could say that.
You follow.
Right. So it would be proprietary guy, i.e. me.
Yeah.
Against
another FOSS like a FOSS developer. Yeah.
So I did think about something similar to that, but don't you just end up again and again arguing philosophical things that don't matter?
Yeah. It seems like the format would get kind of repetitive.
Like that might be one or even like a series of episodes.
But yeah, okay, yes, that's true. Okay, so then the third one would be an interview style show where that week, it is a .NET podcast because it's a .NET developer we're talking to, and it wouldn't necessarily even have to be somebody famous. It could be maybe just one of the more popular projects on GitHub or something like that. And then next week it would be a Cocoa show, and then the week after that it would be a Android. I don't know. We'd want if we did that though. We'd want to really seriously go deep, I think we'd really want to try to go as deep as possible. And I don't know exactly the best way to do that, because then that means you need to have somebody who's familiar with it to ask the right questions to get that stuff out. And that the interview show, the overhead to an interview show is
huge.
It's actually almost another full-time position. It's not full-time work, but it's probably 20, 25 hours maybe in a week, depending if you're lining a lot. If you're really working, once you get established, it'd probably be only a few hours a week. But initially, it would be a lot of work. So, and that would be money, and that's cost and that's overhead. And the problem with that particular one is the format is such that you never know what you're gonna get. What people will do is they will pick and choose. So they'll see the one that sort of appeals to their interest, and they won't listen to the other ones. And so you end up with a really sort of unsteady audience, because you will always get your people who listen to every episode. But see, right now, what people will tune in for, regardless of topic, is just our discussion back and forth, right? That's sort of the tune-in reason, and then the conversation is sort of the plot line that we use for that. And so people tune in every week because of that, regardless, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to a lot of interview structured podcast shows, and I think the problem with them
is they're dry,
and they desperately focus on the person being interviewed. So if that guy doesn't have a personality, which is why I think
nailed it. And what if he has a
that's the
mic like
thing.
yours today?
Right. What if he's on his MacBook Pro today?
Yeah.
Or, this is one area I think the Cocoa podcasts have. Cocoa developers like myself tend to come from like an art background or something like that rather than a pure comp sci Google server nerd. Please send your hate mail to Alan at jupiterbroadcasting.com. And they tend to be better public speakers in general. Like I'd listen to a few very, again, much, I probably shouldn't say, but I've listened to other types of dev podcasts other than the Cocoa ones where they tried the interview thing. And the guy, obviously very smart, obviously could run circles around me in his area. But god damn, the cardboard box in the corner of my office had more of a personality. And that scares me. Because I could fill up, a whole calendar with startup D-bags, basically. Like that's something I could do. But they're kind of all the same guy.
Yeah.
Like,
there's like 3 versions.
there's like
Yeah.
California. No, there's the California and the New York variant, and that's it.
So what about more roundtable discussion? Something
I was thinking like maybe, well, not to cut you off, but kind of almost doing it like a cycle, right? Where there's 4 weeks in a month that we do a show, right? Except for special months or whatever. Do one with the old format of it's just basically feedback, chit-chatting nonsense. I make fun of you for being a traitor to Linux. Then the next week could be an interview, and then the following week would be like almost a Linux Unplugged style show.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking is, but instead of like a full open mumble room, maybe like a more fixed group, people that would sort of be willing to kind of try and make it every single week. That we would, and maybe the way I'm trying to figure out how you would do that. Maybe you'd start with a more open room and then sort of invite and ask people if they could start, notice who shows up regularly. But that would take a long time. So, but my point is that though would sort of mean it's probably going to be more of like a topical discussion.
Right. You would still need to come up with the topic, and I think the other thing is like love the JV people, but there are certain topics they're probably not super gonna, especially the guys who would come in the mumble room, right? It's just not going to be down with. However, today would have been a great mumble room thing with Google's bullshit about your address.
Yeah.
I don't.
It depends, on the mumble room. Like for example, Tech Talk Today has a mumble room every day, and Tech Talk Today is more about just the general news, which is often not Linux related at all, and they don't, it works because, the show sort of has a certain set of followers depending on what it covers, and so those people also can tend to be just like they're represented. It varies, right? You're right, though there is the tendency just for people, like if it's anything closed source, then they just shut down the conversation. So there is sometimes a tendency for that, which could make discussion of some things like proprietary things more challenging.
And then the other side of the equation, of course, is what about all like the biz dev PME stuff that's come into the show that I know some people, in fact, I think a lot of people seem to like, but a very angry minority seem to hate. Does that stay a part of it? Does that go away? I feel like it shouldn't go away. I feel like that would be a little, dishonest in a way.
Yeah.
Where does this leave us other than a little sad, Chris?
Well, it seems like so I would maybe let's take a pause and sort of jump back and think about. I would say the current format is we start with taking in audience feedback, and then we sort of discuss what they're asking, and that's sort of there's some content there because we'll kick things around from there. And then it's usually after that we'll transition into a topic of the week that is worth discussing about. So it's not like everything that happened, but maybe something or two things that are kind of big. Sometimes it's obvious because there's been a big, some big news event, and sometimes it's less obvious. It's something a little more buried down, like the Markdown drama or whatever it is. That's kind of what the essential format is now, right? Pretty loose. We talk a lot about the business of it, and that's fair in a sense because there's a lot of people out there that want to go out and do contracting and make money, or are considering leaving work and want to start their own thing, or vice versa. They're worried about maybe stagnating because eventually they want to move somewhere. There's a lot of that aspect to it too. So that is sort of where we're at today, and there is the one thing about that is you're going to get some good conversation from the emails. And if something interesting happened in the week and you just kind of want to stay semi-informed, because we hear a lot of people like, how am I going to stay current? How do I stay on top of everything that's going on? So if you tune into Coder Radio, you're probably going to hear the one or two things that were kind of important that you need to know more about. That's not a bad place to be at, really.
No, it's not. And maybe like that's why I was thinking of, the kind of augmented calendar, right? Where it's, maybe still 50% the old format, and then you just do try to have an interview once a month, or do try to have a mumble room once a month at least. So I think the other thing is, especially this time of year, the party's kind of over. So as we go into this fourth quarter and certainly the opening of the new year, nothing's going to happen, right? Like unless there's a major security vulnerability, or I don't even know, like, Leonard Powering tells Linus to go fuck himself again. Like there's just not much that's going to happen in the dev world.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I have some thoughts about maybe the downsides to that.
Okay.
I'm going to thank our first sponsor this week. I hope they enjoy the show this week, because it's all about the show, Linux Academy. Now, I had a chance at Ohio Linux Fest to talk to some folks who've been trying out Linux Academy, and everybody universally said they absolutely love it. So here's what you do. Go to linuxacademy.com/coders. That'll get you a great discount, so that way you can get started right away. And you're going to want to use the subscription, because then you get access to all of the content as they update it, as they release new stuff, as they have cool sessions going on. So what is Linux Academy? It's a way for you to get started with step-by-step video courses and audio tutorials with labs on anything from Linux, AWS, OpenStack, DevOps, which is growing like crazy these days. I know we have a lot of people in the sort of quote-unquote DevOps area, and one of the things that people are constantly emailing into TechSnap about is, I am now sort of managing all of these servers, and it is a mess. How can I centrally manage these things? How can I deploy and manage all of my configurations? How can I manage all these patches I need to deploy? I've got software to write too. And guess what? Linux Academy has got courses on how you can set that up. And like, for example, Chef or Puppet. And one of the great things about Linux Academy is you can choose whichever Linux distribution you want. They've got more than 7. And when you choose that, they'll automatically adjust the courseware to match the distribution you've chosen. How neat is that? 24,701 quizzes taken. 2,128 labs completed. And Linux Academy is really just getting started. I've heard that I think they're going to try to integrate almost a dozen or more new courses by the end of the year. And as part of your subscription, you'll just get access to them for free. And what's neat is as you go through the course, if that course requires a virtual server, they'll spin it up and they'll make it all accessible for you. They'll give it a public IP address. You can even have other people log in to really actually explore and learn the material. You're going to work with the stuff you're trying to learn. And they have scenario-based courses. So you'll actually go through an entire deployment from start to finish, and you'll walk away having done it. So next time you go to do it in production, you've already got one under your belt. And they're adding new features all the time, like learning plans, that will just ask you, hey, how much time do you have available to commit? And you tell it, and they'll automatically create courseware for you based on your time restraints, which is really great if you're busy. I know we've heard from some new parents, for example, that have a lot more time restrictions in their life. Well, if you can find maybe 20 minutes on a Saturday, do it. And maybe next time, maybe next week, you'll have a couple of hours, and you just adjust it as you go. It's really great. And they tell you, you can go right back in and pick up right where you left off, and they'll tell you this section of the course is going to take you this long. So you can really budget appropriately. It's such a great system for anyone who's trying to augment their skill set or take them to the next level. Or if you've really kind of been in a rut and you want to pick it up, linuxacademy.com/coders. And a big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. So here's the disadvantage I see to that. I like it on the surface because the idea itself is good. What I don't know if I necessarily like too much, I don't know if it's a big deal really, to be honest with you, the more I think about it, but I'm a little worried about inconsistency because I think I don't want to cause, this is a really douche term to use, but I don't want to cause friction to people like when they go to make the decision, should I listen to Coder Radio right now or my other podcast? I don't want there to be a lot of friction in that decision. And if it's, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to get. Is this going to be a week where I don't like this particular, I don't want that little doubt to sort of get in the way.
Isn't that what they get now though with the crazy broad topic? Like,
Well, no, like I said, I mean, yes, you're right. But in principle, they know what the meta framework is, the community discussion, and the sort of important thing I need to know about this week. And that's the meta framework that you know you're going to get. And then what do we plug into that? It varies from time to time. But if you buy into the framework, you always know you're getting that at least.
I mean, we could also do something crazy, like something no one else has ever done, and just gamify the whole thing. Almost somehow use the subreddit to have the audience dictate the topics.
Yeah, how would you get enough involvement though to make that actually work?
Yeah, I don't think you could. I think it would end up being, the Linux Action Show Part 3 over and over again.
Well, if you look at our subreddit, is it a lot of that, or is it? I think it's pretty well balanced in there.
Our subreddit. Let's take a look right now. I'm gonna just read the titles of the top 3 stories.
Coderradio.reddit.com.
Okay. Ouch, my back, which was posted by me because my back is killing me in this cheap Staples chair.
I love that one. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Conversation
with Google
from
which
PT
is someone,
Dave.
PT Dave, and then Mono for Unreal by a name I can't pronounce.
But I've seen that one, Wiggle Waffles. I've seen that one going around the net a lot.
Yeah, so maybe not. Maybe it would work, but it would be very risky.
I think we'd have to minimum double the amount of people in that subreddit because you got to count on a small percentage of them actually getting involved. I don't know, man. That's an interesting idea, though. It seems like it almost be like Dig. Remember the Dig show? Did you ever watch that?
I know what it is, yeah.
Yeah, but for development. Then again, though, but then you were concerned about the varying topics. That's really going to be varying topics.
That could be crazy, right? And then there's the whole aspect of, well, what if something's obviously a trolley post?
Well, then we just have to ignore. I mean, we'd have to have veto power.
We'd have to retain veto power, but then at some point, would we be Governor Christie, just veto everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love him, by the way, if he's my kind of guy. But at some point, if you're facing a lot of opposition, you end up wielding that veto like a katana. You just don't stop.
I think. I like what I like about the subreddit right now, and it works even for the ratio that's in there, is it's sort of like a temperature guide. So like if there's a couple topics we've been thinking about, you see what the subreddit's been talking about. Sometimes they got a better idea, you go with it. Sometimes they sort of validate what you're thinking about, or sometimes you're like, oh, kind of based on the temperature here, maybe this isn't a topic we should discuss. Right. And the other thing I pick up from the subreddit is just trends. What do we see trend-wise? What are people continually submitting? What topics have we talked about a while ago that now people are submitting follow-up on? Obviously, that meant they were interested in it. I'll monitor it for those kinds of things, too. So the subreddit is really useful in that sense. And it does help with the current format quite a bit.
Yeah, there are obvious topics that I think we get a lot of feedback and a lot of, community involvement, right? So individual developers, and that could mean people or companies, relationships to large platform vendors, i.e. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Ubuntu.
One of the things I think one of our best, I really hate bragging, but I think one of our best moments was really getting the Docker folks on so early. I think that was one of our shining moments, and I liked that. I think there's something there. I think there's something in the interview format. The problem would be it might not be consistent, so we kind of have to have a backup plan.
Well, you do remember why we stopped the interview format, though, right? And this might be too much inside baseball for on air, but
I don't
remember what happened, right? Or no, because we got a whole lot of no's too.
Oh,
remember?
Yeah,
especially that one very prominent no because he was afraid to come on JB. You remember that?
Yeah, because but I think that. That might not be I don't really think that's a. I don't. Okay. None of our other shows have that problem though. So I don't think that's.
Well, I think because none of your other shows are trying to, to use a political term, right, reach across the aisle. I mean, we could totally interview a bunch of back-end Linux developers all day long. But if we ever want to grab, let's say, Cocoa guys and .NET guys, we've kind of seen the responses to that, right? And we won't name names, because people asked us not to. People asked me not to. But
yeah, and that's sort of that's sort of a reason to have a producer to sort of just continue to work through that.
Well, I think there's some, particularly in that .NET camp, especially for people who might have more to lose. I think some fences would have to be mended, and what does that mean for just really inside baseball? What does that mean for JB as a whole, right?
And I kind of go back to so here's my stance. Like, here's what I come down to is at the end of the day,
right?
That guest coming on the show is really good for them. It's they give us 1 week of content. We give them years and years and years of traffic I mean, it's like the payoff for them is so much higher than the payoff for us that I kind of get to the point where, like, if they don't see that and they don't want to come on the show, somebody else will. Really?
Well,
and it's not a big deal to me.
When it's one individual guest, I think it's true. But if you're trying to do a true, like, reach across the aisle, reach across the different platforms
Sure,
kind of development show, you can't have, for example, prominent .NET developers all blackball you.
Well, I think it'd be worth if we had somebody that had the time to poke at that and see if that's still an issue.
It was an issue 6 months ago.
Right, I still think so.
They were citing things from 7 years ago, right? Like,
but
things
we've had on Linux Action Show, we've had people. I mean, we've had tons and tons and tons and tons of proprietary. I mean, we go to cons, we talk to Microsoft, everybody, all up and down, Oracle. Everybody's been on the Linux Action Show. I mean, it's really not been an issue in any of our other shows.
I think at conventions, because it's more of a controlled
environment. It's not just conventions, though. It's Skype, it's Hangouts. I mean, we can try again. Maybe the few I tried to reach out to are just bitches. It's like it's possible that they're just kind of, whatever. Like they don't, and it's also true that maybe they don't need it, right? Yeah.
So do you just go one rung below that and go to the up and coming people? Do you?
I think it's more like what you do is you just move on and come back to them later and see if they've changed their mind.
So my fear with that is I don't want to have, I don't want to do a show that's all people developing on Linux, like Python people. I don't want basically a server-side development hour, right?
Right.
Because that's kind of what LAS turns into when you talk, and I like LAS, right? But that's kind of what it is when you talk about development. It's, if you get a bunch of Linux guys in the room, what are they going to want to talk about? Linux and the server.
Why is the assumption to just be Linux people, though?
Why would it? I don't know. I feel like that would be the easiest to get.
I'm thinking we. See, the thing is I don't know if those are the people we necessarily need to go after, because those people that's already a market that's being filled by other shows that are established.
Like the Linux folks?
Well, no. Let's take a step back. Why not talk to this is why, again, I go back to do this, it would require a producer that put a lot of time in initially. Because I'm not saying you or I do this footwork, because we honestly don't have the time to do it. But somebody goes out there and talks to popular projects on GitHub, follows the news. It's to be somebody that's savvy with new projects people are working on. They're involved in those communities already, potentially, and they would do initial screenings. They would Skype or hang out with them. They would talk to them, kind of get an idea of what they're about, and then they would send them on to us, and we'd book them, or they would book them.
Sure, but that's a ton of work. That's like having a little HR department for
right. But then again, if we end up getting an hour and a half show out of that, well, then we could add more sponsorships, and we could eventually pay that person. It wouldn't be a lot of money, but they'd actually make money from the position. The funny thing is the time where it's the most work would be initially while you're learning how to do it and all of that. Like I said, it'd be a lot of hours. And by the time you actually got paid, it would be when you're doing the least amount of work, because by then it's going to be only a few hours a week. And
do you know what kind of people I'd like to get on? Like people who make developer tools.
Sure.
Right. And
what you would do is you would just work with that person and say, hey, go after these people or these types of people, or go find these category of people who, I want to talk to this category.
The CodeShip people I thought were great. We got them on, right? We got their CTO on, Moritz, who's a nice guy, emails me. Actually, I did drop the ball. The GitLab people want to come on, and I need to follow up with them because I got busy. Like those, I think would be good.
And
interviews.
Again, you would just forward that off to the producer and say, hey, this is somebody we need to follow up with.
Any volunteers, chat?
Well, maybe. I mean, we did that for the Linux Action Show. We put out the call, and it's worked out.
That would be super feasible. I just think it's...
The thing is like with LAS, we got to... What I wanted... Yeah, what I'd like to do is if we take on more people, I'd really like to make sure that eventually there's a way to...
compensate.
Yeah. Because that's the thing we're still struggling with right now, is finding a way to afford that and make it economical. And maybe I work that into like the Tech Talk Today patreon.com/today, and I put a milestone and say producers are funded or something like that, and then we say if you want to help fund the producers, go here, and then it would be regardless of sponsorship. Then we would have it just sort of locked in. So that's something we can play with, but it'd be really hard finding the right person,
the right producer. There's just so much that would come into that role, like that person's own personal biases. Maybe not.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, sure. It depends on them, I suppose.
I guess it does.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got a couple more things a couple other ideas. Plus, we also have the emails we can get to.
We
I mean,
do.
I feel like we haven't resolved anything, though. So let's try to...
I feel like we haven't. So I feel like what maybe we should do is table the conversation, right? I'm going to not be a jerk and reply to the GitLab people. And
see what the audience thinks.
See what the audience thinks. Let's ask them to go on the subreddit, right? Give some comments. Because I know there's lots of you who are probably going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. It's fine.
Email works too, but it would be nice to have the subreddit just so that way we can...
Yeah, email really doesn't work. My Gmail's out of control.
Yeah, well, and it would be nice so that way we could have a dialogue going in there. Yeah. And I'll try to be active in there too. And then the other thing about that is it can also, we can gauge a sense of, if we ask the subreddit to call to action, can they actually
do something?
Yeah. So coderradio.reddit.com.
I do want to address this after you do an ad read, of course. This whole conversation with Google thing before we close.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yes. Oh, in fact, we should run soon because it lasts. Very good. Yes, that is definitely something I want to talk about. All right. Well, then before we get to that, I will thank the great folks over at DigitalOcean. Of course, Mike and I love DigitalOcean, so we cannot go any further without stopping right here and talking about them. And every single week, DigitalOcean gets better and better. They've just introduced metadata. It's actually kind of a cool concept, and it makes automating the provisioning of your droplets even slicker. So they have got a link on their front page. Go read more about that. It's another great example of the constant innovation that's happening over at DigitalOcean. So let's talk a little bit about DigitalOcean and why I think they are actually pretty damn innovative. DigitalOcean is a simple cloud hosting that's dedicated to offering the most intuitive and easy way to spin up a cloud server. And the reason why they say it's intuitive, and I absolutely agree, is they have this amazing dashboard. Their interface is so simple, and their control panel is so awesome and slick. And power users can replicate that control panel on a larger scale with their straightforward API. And it's so nice to be able to just go in there and take advantage of all of those awesome underlying technologies in this easy-to-use interface. And I cannot believe that I am using a beautiful website to spin up a KVM virtual machine on a super powerful machine that I now have root access to in seconds. Users usually can create a cloud server in under 55 seconds. I've actually heard like 30 seconds, 32 seconds. It's nuts. It just kind of depends, And the pricing only starts at $5 per month. That'll get you 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD. They're all SSDs, top to bottom, which is, if you're an older server guy, if you've deployed did you ever have to do the colo thing? And you had to have several drives. Make sure you do them in a mirror, or like put a RAID 5 or something in there, right? Because you need that performance from those old spinning drives. Or in my case, we had to have huge arrays. And then SSDs come along, and it just blows all that away. It just blows it all away. One of the awesome things is there's a lot of tricks you can do to get a lot out of that. And you can always add more storage because they've got really sensible pricing tiers. Plus, you get a terabyte of transfer with that $5 plan. A terabyte. You just know that I have a terabyte to use. It's great. And they've got locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, a gorgeous new data center in London. Go look at their Instagram feed and look at that data center porn. It's great. DigitalOcean gets you. But something even better about DigitalOcean is they're getting really, really serious about their community, about making some of the best tutorials available so that way you can take advantage of your $5 droplet. And don't forget, with our promo code, Snap October, or not Snap, just thinking of TechSnap, Coder October, and it's almost over, too, so why not take advantage of this? Coder October will give you a $10 credit. You apply it to your DigitalOcean account. This is such a slick way to do it, too. This is one of my other favorite things about DigitalOcean is how I funded my account. I went in there. You can apply the Coder Radio code to your balance to get the $10 credit, and even if you forgot to do it when you created your droplet because you got all excited and the interface is pop, 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 and you're done, because that's what I actually did the first time I made my droplet, is I forgot to apply the promo code because it's just boom, 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 and you're right, you're done. Oh, now I've got a server. So you can go into your DigitalOcean account. You'll log into your account, and you go apply our promo code, Coder October. Why not take advantage of the month of October while you still can? Coder October will give you that $10 credit. And then go over to their community section and look at those tutorials. DigitalOcean will pay up to $200 if you want to write a tutorial for them, and they even have editing staff that will work with you. Up to 200 bones if you go there and write a tutorial for them. If you've got a topic that you're pretty good on and you think people could benefit from a tutorial, why not at least ping them and see what's up? Because you could earn an extra $200. That's pretty cool. DigitalOcean.com. And a big thank you to DigitalOcean for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. And don't forget, Coder October. Screw those TechSnap guys. Those guys are jerks. All right, Mr. Dominic. Well, before we run, why don't we read this?
Hang on, I got to pour my whiskey before we do this.
Okay. PT Dave, man. You know what? He's always got something good for us to read, doesn't he?
poor guy is always having a hard time. I feel like he might be like my spirit brother in some way.
So I'm going to read the highlights of this, because what PT Dave did here was he posted a chat support that he had with Google, like, you know, the transcript of it. And to his credit, he told them he was going to do this, so it's not like he's being sneaky. He warned them. But he says, they said, "Hi there, thanks for contacting Google Play Developer Support. I understand you're concerned about adding your physical address. How can we help you?" This is, you know, we've talked about this. Developers have to add their actual address, and it's going to be visible. It's going to be public. So he responds, "That's right. The information entered in the address field will be shown on all your apps on Google Play to Google Play users." Then PT Dave says, "Is there no way to conceal this?" And then the Walter guy responds from Google, "As it is a legal requirement, that is correct. It cannot be hidden." Now, he then asks, "Well, what if I remove, you know, so it's not pay, it's only free?" The answer is no. But here's the part that's floored me. So then he says, "All right, well, even if it's a free app and I remove all options," because he had like a button. It was actually a free app, but he had a button to remove ads for like a couple of pennies. And the guy says, no, even if it's free, it's got to be up there. So then PT Dave's response is, "Okay, I would like to pull my apps from the App Store. And here's my app names. Can you please pull these?" And the guy says, "Yeah, let me go look that up." He goes and types it up, and he comes back, and he says, "Actually, these cannot be deleted." He says, we are unable to comment, or no, what did he say? Unfortunately, we will be unable to delete any of your apps as they have at least one install. This is so that we are in compliance with the terms of service, which require that users be provided with unlimited reinstalls. I am sorry for the inconvenience." Then he says, "Well, I know it's not your fault, but I would like to escalate this." Walter replies with, "As I am the manager for Google Play Developer Support, I am sorry to tell you there is no higher authority to escalate this issue to." And then that's it. They never remove his.
So there's a little, the way they phrase this is bad. You can certainly pull your app from sale, but you can't delete it. Now, What that means is, his request to delete the apps, he should have requested they be pulled from sale. Now, this is a dumb distinction.
Well, no, he can go do that himself, right? He could go turn it off in the.
Right. That's all you can do. iTunes is the same way, by the way. Unless you have a legal, like say I'm pulling it for a legal reason, technically people can download your app, download old versions.
Now, here's the thing see, what sucks about that is then those people will always be able to see his address.
So what happens if you simply don't add your address?
Well, I wonder what would happen actually.
Because
then you would not be in compliance with the terms of service of the Google Play Developer Agreement.
Okay,
I would assume.
I guess you'll have to delete my apps.
I wonder. But the thing is I wonder though if his address is already plugged in there because he had to enter it when he signed up. He probably can't go delete it. It probably won't let him save it. So you know what he said though? You know what this guy, the Google guy, said at the beginning that I thought was a bit of a hint.
Legal.
He said, here's what he said. So PT Dave says, as I understand it, all the information will be public, no matter what. Is this true? Walter responds with, that's
yes.
Right. The information entered into the address field will be shown on all your apps. On Google Play. The information entered. Why didn't he say your address? It's almost like he's saying, put some bullshit in there. Like, but he can't say that.
Or he's a support person from a foreign country and messed up the English idiom.
He says he's the manager of Google Developer Play Support. That's what he says in this chat log. He's the frickin' manager.
That sounds like a training line. I've gotten that a few times recently from like Comcast support.
Maybe.
I am the manager. There's no one else to talk to.
Maybe.
So I think the most telling thing is actually the why. They finally said why.
Oh, well, they said legal compliance reasons.
What do you think that means? I mean, what is the biggest issue with the Android App Store?
Knockoffs.
Knockoffs, malicious software, things that are generally either intellectual property crimes or actual malicious content. How do you, think about how hard did Nintendo have to fight to try to deal with, all that weird knockoff Pokemon game that was on the Google Play Store, right? Isn't it nice now if you have malicious or illegal or otherwise, I don't know, somehow offensive software, they could just issue you a subpoena right to your door? Like, I think this is all about like IP and content.
I agree. I think it is definitely about that.
I
And
mean,
I think
sure, smart people would figure out I can just go to one of those rent a mailbox places like Kinko's and
I
do
think
that.
Google in some ways works like the government, where they will start something and they want to move at glacial speed. They want to take
Right.
a long time. They want people to slowly and more get more used to things, and they move it forward a little more. And I think that's what they're doing here. I think this is step one. Step two is it's time. Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be incredible if Google could, in 5 years, be known for having the best app store? Like, way better than Apple, supports way more devices, better applications, really good stuff is exclusive to Google Play for a year when it launches. That would be such a huge turnaround for them. And the only way to get there is to send the sheriff in and clean up the town.
Well, I mean, I know you don't mean the literal sheriff, but there are cases where an actual sheriff may be involved, right?
Yeah, I suppose.
I'm thinking more of the, hey, Google, you want all these content deals with us. What the fuck is with all these apps that let people pirate and share media? No problem, Viacom.
Yeah.
Here's the guy's address. Get your lawyers, start their engines.
As Android grows as a platform and as it becomes one of the dominant computing platforms, let's take an analogy. Look at how they've gone after the Google search, and now they can just send in batch pull down requests and pull down millions of URLs at once, and just do it all right there. And now you've got right to be forgotten getting entered. I mean, like, as Google search as the longer Google search remains the dominant search provider, the monopoly of the search, more and more things like this happen. The same thing will happen in Play.
Chris,
What?
Chris, we don't say monopoly.
Oh. As they become the dominant choice in your
The
search
industry
experience,
Industry leader.
the industry leader for your search experience, then, thank you, yes, good correction, the same thing's happening with Android right now. We're at it's the early days of it, but it's already beginning to happen, and this is the groundwork to make it work. I really believe requirement? It legally is required to be publicly posted? That's
Sure.
legal? Why
Sure,
isn't that true for the Amazon App Store?
Well,
Why
here's
isn't that true for the mic?
It's the simplest scenario in the world. Nintendo, let's just say Miyamoto, because everybody knows his name's over there. What the hell is this Mario game? Calls Google. Hey, just go on the Play Store. There's the address. Go ahead.
I mean, I
it's
guarantee
the easiest thing in the world.
I'm not saying Google is lying. I'm not saying that. But I don't understand why no other app store seems to have this requirement.
Apple doesn't. You don't show your address. But Apple goes through the trouble of taking your certificate of incorporation, and going through all the due diligence to actually confirm that you're a real business.
Well,
so what's happening is that Apple does it all before they give you the developer account, before they give you the license. So it took me, and things are a lot better now. But
and that's what Amazon does too, huh?
When I got FTT their license, it took, oh my God, I think it took almost 2 months, because they couldn't understand that we had a New Jersey address, but we're a Delaware company. Like, that was mind-boggling. Meanwhile, they're a freaking Irish company. Like, they couldn't get interstate commerce, but they're totally down with Ireland, which makes no sense. I had to fax them a copy of the thing from Delaware saying that we are, in fact, a Delaware company with our offices in New Jersey. Literally, old school fax, a thing with the Secretary of State from Delaware seal on it.
It just feels anti-developer to me.
Well, it is, but it's the same process, right? So now if someone came to Apple with a legal claim against this, Apple just says, all right, here they are,
Right.
address
And
here.
You know what? If you think about it, that's exactly what it is. And you know why it is that? Because it's a scale issue. Google couldn't do what Apple's doing at their scale in the Play Store with all of the...
They're making you do the secretarial work for them. That's all it is. It is. I wouldn't be surprised if one day Google does do what Apple does and says, listen, you want to be a corporation on the App Store, we have to see some sort of document from the state, or, if you're foreign province or whatever, that you're incorporated in. Like, that's actually standard for any kind of vendor relationship.
Apple is sort of famous for actually paying people to look at the apps, and they pay people to review these developer accounts. And when Jupiter Broadcasting signed up for an Apple developer account so we could do some testing, I actually got a phone call from somebody, like an actual human being. They asked me a few questions. I
sat on the phone for an hour with a not so bright bulb over at Apple discussing how one could have a New Jersey office and be a Delaware company. it's, and granted, obviously one guy being confused, it was a hectic time. He told me that I had faxed a certificate and their fax machines were so overflowed that it was on the floor.
So this is, to me, Google is deferring the work. And what it is by publicly posting the address, they must be legally satisfying some due diligence there because it's available,
you know what
right?
It is? It's that Google doesn't have to have a person to answer the phone to give them the address. That's all it is. Like, let's say someone found something, illegal in CodeJournal, right? And they were like, fingertip tech. Well, what they would do now is if they couldn't find our address another way, they would just contact Apple, and Apple would be like, it would take a week or two, but I'm sure they would give them the address for a legal claim. So Google's cutting out the middleman, just saying, here it is.
Wow.
Now, the problem we're going to have
it is.
We haven't talked about this at all, but things like that Gamergate stuff. Let's say someone puts up like a feminist app, and these Gamergate scumbags want to go harass this person. Well, that's going to be a problem, right? Like, that's already, I don't know how closely you followed it. I've only followed it tangentially, but they're death threatening, they're forcing people out of their homes.
I've only followed it tangentially too, but I've got all that from it.
Yeah, this is like the Mos Eisley of the internet over here. It's terrible. So Google's kind of creating a freaking monster here. But it is totally the Google solution to this problem, right? Oh, customer service, hiring account representatives, fuck that. Let's make them type it into a Python script.
That's why when you compare it to all past Google actions, this is the one that you plug in the answer to, and it seems to connect the most. To me, this
is the Google way of solving that same verification problem that Apple had,
without having to have a staff of hundreds of people doing it.
Right. Apple hired like 300 people.
And to be fair to Google, they have probably a much higher scale of submissions to the Play Store than Apple does, I would assume, because.
But I don't think they're happy about it. I think what happened is they wanted, just like the Windows Store, they needed to get numbers, so they made some deals with the devil, allowing anybody in, and now they're getting heat from their partners about, frankly, the level of crap, right?
Right. In fact, you got to even figure the OEMs don't like it.
I'm sure they don't, because imagine Samsung or Verizon or whoever is getting all these support calls.
Right.
And because people are installing malicious software on Android.
Or they think they're buying Angry Birds and they got Grumpy Birds and it doesn't work right and it's full of ads. And, some people just don't know. And who do you call at Google? So you call Verizon support or you call Samsung. And the thing is I was actually thinking more from a branding standpoint, right? Because Samsung and LG, they want to start to compete as almost it's a fashion statement, right? This is a really high-end device on some of these, and part of that is what are the apps? Because let's be honest, that's what sells a lot of these devices is kind of what can I do with it? And if you can say, we have the best apps available, and really mean it, I mean that will sell devices.
I got to be honest. When family members ask what smartphone should I get, I always say go for an iPhone because I don't have to worry about any potential problems. Sure, there has been malware on the App Store, on the iOS App Store, but generally speaking, Apple, per capita, right, per 100, there's far less dangerous software in the iOS Store than there are on Android.
Yeah, and usually when you hear about it, it's like the Apple stuff is usually like it read your contacts or read your photos or something.
Because the API in Cocoa just doesn't let you do anything.
You can't get. But the thing is even in those scenarios, the app still has to prompt you at the time, and I think that's a superior safety model too. Because when the app's installing, I'm sorry, I'm kind of I'm more out there in terms of security paranoia, but I always accept. I always do because I want the damn app.
I hate the Android model of giving me this. Like, have you recently installed Facebook on Android?
Yes, just recently, and my God, dude, Messenger. Oh my
God, is there any permission you didn't request?
And I cannot sign out, and I got people's faces that just show up all over my screen.
Yes, and I can't find. I literally cannot find any permissions they didn't request.
I went in, I had to kill the process, and I uninstalled the app because somehow people I don't even know how they got me. I don't even know their names, and I'm getting pictures of women that I don't know on my phone, and I'm like, what if my wife saw that? What would she think, right?
Okay. Chris, do you have something you'd like to confess?
I swear, I do admit I have accepted a lot of people I don't know on Facebook because when Facebook started up, I was just accepting everybody that was like in the audience. So I got a lot of people on there, and I think they can just message me. And the thing was, I installed Messenger because I was going on a trip to Ohio, and I thought, family wants to know what's up. This is how they like to use Messenger, and it was awful. And see, I couldn't believe that I was in a completely different app, and I'm on super tight data restrictions. All of a sudden, faces are on my screen. It just blew me away that that could even happen on a device.
Even the face issue aside, think about this. A non-savvy user on Android, what are the odds they read the permissions, and if they read them, understand them?
Right. Back to my core point, right? The time of access of my contacts or of my GPS or of my photos, that's a better time to ask me.
Right. When I've been in your app and I could see, is this a developer that I feel is up to the quality that I would trust them?
The counter argument is pop-up fatigue, which is also a big problem. So
right. And like we're working with iOS 8 a lot. Huge pain in the ass, right? Because you need pop-ups for everything now.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I get it.
I don't know though. I mean, it doesn't work that well for UAC. So I don't know.
I think that's a different problem. And I think your mobile.
Yeah, I think people have to be more selective in how they use them.
I'm more concerned about the data security on my mobile phone than I am on my PC, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah, me too.
Because I feel like, you know what, if you compromise my laptop, I mean, that's bad. That's a lot of bad things could happen. If you compromise my mobile phone, particularly on Android, where you might be able to listen to phone calls and great stuff like that, to me, it's just a balance sheet of risk where your phone being compromised this day and age, like I bank on my phone, right?
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
I barely bank on my computer.
I've got naked pictures of my kid's butt on my phone right now.
I'm going to send the FBI to your house.
All right, so if you would, go over to coderradio.reddit.com and give us your feedback on the format stuff. You can also email us, but the thing is we have a lot of emails we didn't get to this week, and I'd like to try to get to some of them next week, maybe, but we'll see. But you can also email us. But coderradio.reddit.com would also give other folks a chance to chime in. And one thing maybe to email in is if you heard our talk about the producer stuff and you think that might be something you're interested in, really give it some thought. How much time do you have? Are you, like one of the things is if you're unemployed right now, that's not necessarily means you're a great fit, because once you find a job, we might be out of producer, and then we could be left high and dry and be really screwed. So really think about what kind of time you could commit to a show. And it have to be, quite a few hours initially. If you are comfortable reaching out to people, Skyping them and talking to them, if that kind of sounds like something, and our general interests, you feel like you got a good feel for what we'd like to talk about, email us, coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or go to the contact link and send it in and put like producer in the subject line or something like that. And we'll look for those. And that's something we could consider doing too. But in the meantime, we'll trek on. Mr. Dominic, is there anything else we want to cover before we skedaddle, as they say in Ohio?
No, I'm good. I'm going to go violate some Android users' security.
I should have said this earlier in the show. Oh my gosh. I saw some Coder Radio fans at Ohio Linux Fest. Some Coder Radio shirts. Oh yeah, man. And you know what? I got quite a few people that are like, "Oh, I hoped Michael was going to be here since it's on the East Coast." Yeah. You were a missed man at Ohio Linux Fest.
Send me an invitation.
You know what? It was my bad. I should have asked you.
Yeah.
I should have, because people were asking about you. People liked the show.
Honestly, I was feeling slighted. I thought you liked Alan better. I was hurt.
All right, everyone. Well, join us live while we're on Mondays. I think we'll be here for a while at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, jblive.tv on a Monday, jbcalendar, or jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. I should get jbcalendar.com. That'd be a good one. Don't register that. I'm going to get it. And also, coderradio.reddit.com. Give us some feedback. We really appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed the Meta Show. I promise we won't do many of these. I try not to do shows about shows, but we'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning this week's episode of Coder Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.